Naomi Fields sat back in her recliner, the early sunlight spilling across an old photo album resting on her knees. Her fingertips lingered on one picture, Elena beaming beside Marcus Hayes, the two of them still teenagers then, caught in the glow of a summer afternoon. The image had faded, but the warmth behind it still lived. From the hallway, Camille drifted in with her coffee, hair tousled from sleep. "What's got you so focused this morning?" Naomi's eyes never left the page. "Possibility." Camille gave her a puzzled look, sipping slowly. "That's just Elena and Marcus Hayes. He disappeared from the picture years ago." Naomi finally glanced up, a quiet knowing in her expression. "He didn't disappear from mine." Camille lowered herself into a chair across from her. "Why drag up old memories now?" "Because Elena deserves more than comfort," Naomi said softly, closing the album with care, as if sealing away something precious. Camille sighed. "This about Adrian. He's solid, Mom, steady." Naomi nodded once. Steady doesn't always mean true. Before Camille could answer, the sound of tires crunching over gravel cut through their conversation. Both women paused, glancing toward the front of the house. A moment later, firm knocks echoed against the door. Camille frowned at the clock. "This early? Who could that be?" Naomi rose, smoothing the front of her blouse, her lips curving into a secret smile. "My ride to the church breakfast." "A ride?" Camille muttered, moving toward the door, confused. She pulled it open and froze. "Marcus?" The name tumbled out before she could stop it. He stood there, older now but unmistakable, his familiar half-smile tugging at the edges of his face. "Morning, Camille." Her laugh burst out, half shock, half delight, as she wrapped her arms around him. Behind her, Naomi stayed still, her eyes shining with the calm pride of someone whose faith had finally walked up the driveway. Naomi gave Camille a playful nudge with her purse. "Move along, girl. I'm starving." Camille laughed, shaking her head as Naomi breezed past, that secretive smile still etched on her face. Marcus trailed behind, unsure of what exactly he had walked into, but carried by the quiet pull of the morning. By the time they reached the church fellowship hall, the air was thick with the sweetness of maple syrup and the buttery warmth of fresh biscuits. Near the front, Elena stood arranging flower centerpieces on long tables. Her sundress swayed softly as she moved, her hair pinned back with the neatness of habit. Then her eyes lifted and the moment cracked wide open. "Marcus," she breathed, the vase nearly slipping from her hands. He hadn't even answered before she was across the room, colliding into his arms. Her face pressed into his shoulder, like she'd been waiting years for that embrace. Conversations around them stilled, replaced by knowing smiles from those who understood what reunion felt like. Naomi lingered at the edge of the room, arms folded, her grin one of quiet triumph. "The magic's already working," she murmured to herself. The morning unfolded easily, the three of them tucked at a corner table. Over pancakes and coffee, 7 years thinned to nothing. Their laughter returned with a kind of rhythm only time apart could create. It was all ease, no expectation, just the comfort of finding something familiar again. When most of the crowd had gone, Marcus leaned toward her, his voice low. "Elena, how about lunch next Saturday?" Her smile came slowly, but her eyes carried the spark he remembered. "I'd love that." The following weekend, a quiet downtown bistro became their space. Conversation flowed as if it had been waiting. Childhood memories bled into talk of their careers. Her stories of advertising campaigns meant to stir hearts. His work in cybersecurity, protecting what others took for granted. "It's a relief," Marcus admitted, "to sit with someone who sees me for more than money or titles." Elena studied him, her gaze steady. "That's because we remember who you are. Money doesn't change that." Yet life was never as simple as pancakes and memory. Elena had been with Adrian for nearly a year. On paper, it was a respectable match. They worked under the same roof at the agency, though his constant travel kept them more apart than together. Their time felt managed, like appointments penciled into a calendar. Dinners polite, conversations safe, no real spark to chase. Naomi saw it all, the checkboxes, the going through motions. Adrian wasn't unkind or unworthy. He was responsible, successful, the sort of man people admired. But Naomi also saw what Elena tried to ignore. There was no fire in her daughter's eyes, no joy in her voice when she spoke of him. He was more idea than partner, a comfortable placeholder in a life that deserved so much more. Naomi often sat in her recliner, worry settling in her chest. She feared Elena might one day mistake steady for enough, that if Adrian proposed, she'd say yes out of timing, not out of truth. Naomi had lived long enough to know what settling looked like, and she couldn't bear to watch her daughter take that path. Not when she knew whose name still lingered in Elena's heart, because Elena had never let anyone else in the way she had with Marcus. Their bond had once been rare, deep, and unshakable. Careers had pulled them in opposite directions after college, and like so many with ambition, they lost their footing together. But Marcus had never faded completely, not for Naomi, and not for Elena, even if she didn't say it out loud. What Elena didn't realize was that Naomi had quietly stayed in touch with him. She had been part of his life long before love bloomed between him and her daughter. When Marcus's mother passed while he was still a toddler, and his father worked long hours just to keep the lights on, Naomi had stepped in. She became his safe harbor, the one to patch together what was missing. Now she believed the time had come. She wasn't about to let Elena walk blindly into a life that looked good, but felt empty. The test arrived sooner than she expected. Adrian returned from his latest stretch of travel, surprising Elena with a rare free weekend. She invited him to Sunday dinner at Naomi's house, eager to stitch him back into a rhythm he rarely shared. Together they stepped inside, greeted by the smell of roast chicken and sweet potatoes. Naomi, in her apron, adjusted the last of the silverware with deliberate care. Elena smiled, ready to help, until her steps faltered. From the kitchen, Marcus appeared carrying a bowl of green beans in one hand and a basket of warm cornbread in the other. Elena froze in the doorway, her breath caught between surprise and something sharper. Adrian glanced at her, confused, then turned toward the man standing casually with a bowl of green beans. Marcus set the dishes down on the table, his smile calm, polite. But his eyes found Elena's, and for a moment the room was just the two of them again. Adrian's hand slipped into Elena's, steady but tentative. "And you are?" "Marcus Jensen," Naomi said smoothly, stepping in before either man could measure the silence. "Old friend of the family, practically one of my own." Adrian nodded stiffly, extending a hand. Marcus accepted it, firm but not forceful. The exchange was civil, but the weight underneath was clear. They sat. Plates were passed, bowls shifted from hand to hand, silverware clinking softly. Naomi carried the conversation at first, asking Adrian about his recent trip, laughing at Marcus's dry humor, nudging Elena to share updates from her agency. On the surface, it was ordinary, a family meal, polite and pleasant. But under the table of roast chicken and cornbread, tension rippled. Adrian leaned back after a few bites, directing his words at Elena, though his eyes flicked toward Marcus. "You didn't mention we'd be having company tonight." Elena hesitated, her fork hovering. It was a surprise." Her voice faltered, betraying more than she intended. Marcus kept his gaze on his plate, though a faint curve touched his mouth. "Didn't mean to intrude." Naomi insisted. Naomi sipped her tea, unbothered. "The more the merrier, especially when it's family." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "Family?" "Yes," Naomi said, folding her napkin with deliberate care. "Marcus grew up just down the street. His mama passed when he was little. I stepped in where I could. He's always been a son to me." Her eyes met Adrian's, unwavering. "That makes him family." The words landed heavy. Adrian offered a polite nod, but the undercurrent was clear. Marcus wasn't just a guest at this table. The meal pressed on. Conversation flickered between travel stories and childhood memories. Marcus's quiet baritone grounding every word, Adrian's polished voice layering over. Elena sat between them. Her appetite vanished, torn between gratitude and unease. Finally, as Naomi carried dessert from the kitchen, Adrian reached for Elena's hand. His grip was firm, claiming, "You've been distant lately," he said softly, but the table was quiet enough that both Naomi and Marcus heard. "We need to talk about where this is going." Marcus's fork stilled. His eyes lifted, steady and unreadable. Elena swallowed, her heart pounding. Naomi returned just then with a peach cobbler, setting it down with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dessert's ready," she said, her tone bright as glass. "And maybe after, we'll finally say out loud what everyone's been dancing around." Silence fell, thick and sharp. Marcus leaned back in his chair, unflinching. Adrian's jaw tightened further. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. The confrontation had begun, not in raised voices, but in glances, in silence, in the unspoken truth that 3 hearts and 1 future sat tangled at Naomi's dinner table. Adrian set his fork down with a sharp clink against the plate. His gaze cut straight to Elena, ignoring Marcus entirely. "Is this what's been keeping you so distracted?" His voice was low, tight, but the accusation laced every word. Elena's lips parted, her breath shaky. "Adrian, no. Marcus leaned forward slightly, not defensive, just steady. "Don't blame her." His tone was calm, but it carried weight. "I came because Naomi asked me. That's all." Adrian's eyes flicked toward him, cool and skeptical. "Funny how convenient that is. You show up after all these years, just as Elena and I are building something." "Building?" Naomi interrupted, her voice slicing through the air. She placed her napkin down with careful precision, her expression sharp. "Son, what you two have isn't building. It's existing. There's a difference." Adrian turned to her, jaw tightening. "With all due respect, Naomi, that's not your call to make. It is when it's my daughter's heart on the line," she fired back, her eyes flashing. The room went still. Elena's throat constricted, caught between loyalty and longing. "Mom, please." "No, Elena," Naomi pressed, leaning toward her. "You've been walking half asleep, convincing yourself that routine is love. I've watched it. I've felt the emptiness in this house after your dinners with him." She glanced at Adrian briefly, then back to her daughter. "Love isn't supposed to feel like an appointment." Adrian's hands clenched into fists on the table. "So what, Marcus waltzes back in and suddenly he's the answer? That's what you're telling her?" Marcus finally looked him in the eye, his calm turning to something sharper. "I'm not here to take anything. I'm here because I care, always have. If that threatens what you two share, maybe you should ask why." Elena's breath hitched, her eyes darting between the 2 men. Adrian's face hardened, his voice rising. "We've built a life, Marcus, a future. You don't just get to erase that." "A life on paper," Naomi muttered. Adrian shot her a glare, but turned back to Elena. "You need to decide. Right here, tonight." The words dropped like a stone, and all eyes shifted to her. Elena's chest rose and fell, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Marcus waited, patient but resolute. Adrian bristled, unyielding. Naomi's stare burned with quiet insistence, and at the center of it all, Elena realized the truth was no longer something she could outrun. By the time dessert had been cleared, Elena's nerves were frayed. The walls of her mother's dining room had grown too tight, the gazes too heavy. She pushed her chair back, forcing a brittle smile. "It's late. I need to get home." Adrian stood quickly, almost possessive in the way he took her arm. Marcus only nodded, watching her leave with a quiet steadiness. In the car, silence stretched until Adrian broke it, his voice sharp. "You're going to explain what that was back there." Elena stared out the window, the blur of streetlights painting streaks across her reflection. "Not tonight," she murmured, her voice flat. "I'm too tired. We'll talk tomorrow." His knuckles tightened on the wheel, but he said nothing more. The next afternoon, Elena dialed Adrian's number, her stomach knotted. She asked him to meet for lunch. No answer, she tried again. Straight to voicemail? Something in her gut told her not to wait. So instead of heading back to the office, she parked across the street, her eyes narrowing as she spotted him near the cafe downstairs. Adrian wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him, young, stylish. They leaned in, laughter slipping between them like shared secrets. Elena's heart didn't shatter. Instead, a strange calm washed over her, steady and bittersweet. She even smiled, a laugh bubbling up, not from humor but from clarity. She pulled out her phone and called him again, her eyes fixed on his every move. Across the street, Adrian glanced at his buzzing phone, hesitation flickering for half a second. Then he set it face down, The woman tilted her head. Do you need to answer that? He shook his head, casual, dismissive. No unimportant. His voice was smooth, practiced. Then he leaned forward, asking her what her plans were for the weekend. The words cut deeper than any betrayal, not the flirtation, not the easy charm he poured onto someone else, but the way he erased her, the way he dismissed her like she was nothing. Elena's hand trembled, but she steadied it, lifting her phone again, this time recording. The laughter, the glances, the words he thought no one else would hear. Later, she would learn the woman was a newly hired colleague at the agency. For now, all she knew was that the truth had arrived, plain and undeniable. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Elena felt something close to freedom. Adrian wasted no time. The evening after the dinner, he showed up at Elena's apartment, his expression carved from stone. He didn't bother with pleasantries, just stepped inside as soon as she opened the door. Last night, he began, his tone sharp, was unacceptable. Elena blinked, her arms folding across her chest. Unacceptable? Yes. He paced the small living room like a caged animal. Your mother blindsided me inviting him there. And you, he jabbed a finger toward her. You sat there and let it happen. Elena took a slow breath, forcing calm into her voice. Adrian, my mother has every right to invite whoever she wants to her table. It's her house, her dinner. That's not the point, he snapped. The point is Marcus Hayes, your ex, sitting there like he still belonged. Her eyes narrowed. I didn't expect him either. I was caught off guard. She lifted her chin, steady. Don't twist it into something it wasn't. Adrian's jaw flexed. You expect me to believe that? The way he looked at you, the way you looked back. Stop, Elena cut in, her voice sharper than she intended. You're reading into it. Yes, Marcus and I have history. But I didn't invite him, Adrian. I didn't even know he'd be there until I saw him walk out of the kitchen. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Adrian's eyes burned with suspicion, but Elena refused to drop her gaze. Finally, he let out a humorless laugh, running a hand through his hair. This is exactly what I was afraid of, him coming back. You letting him back in. Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. Inside, her anger simmered, not from guilt, but from the hypocrisy of hearing this now after what she had seen at his office. She could have thrown the recording in his face, demanded answers for the way he had so easily dismissed her to another woman. But instead, she stayed still, quiet, calculating. Not tonight, she told herself. Not yet. She needed more than suspicion, more than a single scene taken out of context. She wanted truth so undeniable that Adrian couldn't sidestep it with excuses. Adrian, she said softly, her tone measured. I don't owe you apologies for something I didn't plan. Marcus showing up was a surprise to me too. But if you can't trust me enough to see that, her voice faltered, then steadied. Then maybe we're the problem. Adrian's jaw tightened again, but he said nothing. The silence between them was heavier than any argument, and in that silence, Elena knew. The cracks were already too deep to ignore. Elena had always known she and Adrian were cut from different cloth. At the office, their circles barely overlapped. Different departments, different projects, different worlds. Most people probably didn't even know they were a couple. Adrian liked it that way, keeping his personal life compartmentalized. Elena, on the other hand, moved easily among colleagues, striking friendships across departments. That ease is what made it simple to get close to Kelsey, the woman Adrian had been laughing with at the cafe. Kelsey was new to the company, bright and open, happy to chat during breaks. Over the course of a week, Elena listened carefully, piecing together what Adrian never confessed. He had been approaching Kelsey for 2 weeks, circling her with charm and persistence. She had finally given in, agreeing to meet him for lunch that Saturday to get to know each other better. Elena didn't confront him right away. She wanted certainty, proof. So on Friday evening, she called him. How about we do lunch tomorrow? She suggested lightly, her tone casual, almost teasing. Make up for the drama at my mother's dinner? Adrian's voice was smooth, practiced. I'd love to, Elena, but I already promised my brother I'd help clean out Grandma's attic. It's an all-day thing. Elena tilted her head, staring at her phone. I can help, she offered. I don't mind, but he brushed her off quickly. No need. We've got it covered. She ended the call with a steady, okay, though inside her decision had already solidified. The next day, Elena arrived at the restaurant before noon, sliding into a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. 10 minutes later, Adrian walked in with Kelsey, smiling like a man without secrets. They never noticed her. He guided Kelsey to a table across the room, pulling out her chair with gallant ease. Elena dialed his number again, her phone steady in her hand. Across the restaurant, she watched him glance at the screen, hesitate, then flip the phone over without answering. Her lips curved into a tight smile. She sent a text. Sure you don't need help with that attic? Nothing. Her patience thinned. She scrolled to his brother's number and pressed call. A groggy voice answered, Elena? Hey, what's up? Just checking if you two need an extra pair of hands today. Adrian said you were cleaning out your grandmother's attic. A pause, then a confused laugh. Attic? No, I'm at home in the garden. Haven't seen Adrian all week. Adrian phone ping again from the text message. Do you need to response to that text? Kelsey asked. No one important, he said. The words landed like steel. Elena thanked him sweetly, hung up and pressed go live stream on her social media app. My boyfriend of a year, she told the quiet audience as her camera panned across the restaurant, is on a date with someone else. For 30 minutes she streamed, Adrian laughing, Kelsey leaning closer. The waiter placing drinks on the table, Adrian ignoring another text, then pocketing his phone with a smile that made Elena's stomach twist. Not from heartbreak, but from the insult of being dismissed. Finally, she ended the stream and rose to her feet. The room seemed to hush as she crossed it, calm, deliberate. Kelsey spotted her first. Oh, hi, Elena, Kelsey said brightly, not yet connecting the dots. Nice to see you again. Have you met Adrian? He works in the same building. Elena turned her gaze to Adrian. His face had drained of color, his mouth opening but no words forming. Yes, Elena said, her tone cool as ice. We've met. Adrian happens to be my boyfriend. For the past year. She tilted her head, her smile sharp. Though I suppose I missed the memo. He's dating you now. Kelsey froze, her eyes widening as the realization hit. Adrian finally found his voice, desperate and cracking. Wait, it's not what it seems. But Elena cut him off, her smile unwavering. My mother will be thrilled to hear about this. She always suspected you weren't the right man. Gasps rippled from nearby tables. Adrian reached out as if to stop her, but Elena stepped back, shaking her head. Don't! She turned to leave, her heels striking the floor with finality. Behind her, Kelsey's voice rose in fury. Are you serious, Adrian? A girlfriend? You told me you were single. Kelsey, please. But she was already on her feet, shoving her chair back. Don't bother. You're disgusting. With that, she stormed out, leaving Adrian sitting in the wreckage of his lies. Elena didn't look back. Her phone was silent in her hand, but the evidence she carried, the recording, the live stream, the truth, was louder than anything Adrian could say, and for the first time in a long while, she felt light. Elena drove straight to her mother's house, the weight of the afternoon still burning in her chest. When Naomi opened the door, one look at her daughter's eyes was enough. She ushered her inside without a word, guiding her to the couch. Marcus was already there, fixing a loose hinge on a side table for Naomi. He straightened, sensing something sharp in the air. Elena pulled out her phone, opened the saved video and pressed play. For 10 minutes, the three of them sat together, the sound of Adrian's laughter filling the room as he leaned closer to Kelsey. His words were casual, almost charming, until the one that mattered most echoed through the speakers. No one important. Naomi's lips thinned, her hand tightening around her teacup. I knew it, she muttered, her voice a mix of fury and relief. I told you, Elena, he was never the one. Elena swallowed hard. It wasn't even the cheating that broke me, she admitted, her voice trembling. It was that he erased me, like I didn't matter. After everything, after a year, I was just no one important. Marcus's jaw tensed, but his voice was steady. That says more about him than it ever will about you. Elena looked at him, eyes glistening. There was no judgment in his tone, only quiet certainty. You deserve someone who sees you every day, not someone who hides you. Naomi reached over, brushing her daughter's cheek. Baby, this is a blessing in disguise. You found out before you lost more time. Elena nodded, her heart heavy but clearer than it had been in months. 2 nights later, the pounding on her apartment door echoed like thunder. Elena had been expecting it. She opened the door to find Adrian standing there, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, as though sleep had abandoned him. "Elena, please," he said before she could speak. "Let me explain." She stepped back but didn't invite him in. "Explain what? That you lied? That you were dating your co-worker while telling me I was the only one?" "It wasn't like that," Adrian insisted, his voice urgent. "Kelsey and I, it was harmless, just talking." Elena's brows lifted. "Harmless?" "You told her you were single. You told her I wasn't important." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she steadied herself. "That wasn't harmless, Adrian. That was intentional." He dragged a hand down his face, pacing the hallway. "I was scared, okay? Scared of how serious we were getting. Scared of not being enough for you. And then she showed interest, and it was easy. Too easy." Stop." Elena's voice was sharp now. "You don't get to dress betrayal up as fear. You had choices, Adrian. You chose to lie, to sneak, to humiliate me." Adrian's shoulders sagged, his voice dropping. "I don't want to lose you." "You already did," she whispered. He froze, searching her face for softness, for forgiveness. But there was none left. Elena closed the door, gently but firmly, the lock clicking into place, like the final note of a song. Behind the wood, she could hear him curse under his breath before his footsteps faded down the hall. She leaned against the door, breath shaking, then pulled out her phone. A message from Naomi glowed on the screen. "Dinner tomorrow. Marcus will be here too. You don't have to go through this alone." For the first time in a long while, Elena let herself believe her mother was right. Comfort wasn't love, and what was lost could sometimes be found again, if you were brave enough to open the door to it. The following evening, Naomi's dining table held more comfort than conflict. No shouting, no hidden agendas, just roast duck, cornbread, and the easy rhythm of family. Elena sat across from Marcus, their conversation flowing like a current rediscovered. He told her about his recent project at the cybersecurity firm, how he'd been building protocols to protect non-profit organizations from online fraud. She listened with genuine curiosity, remembering the younger Marcus, who used to scribble notes in the margins of his notebooks, always chasing ideas bigger than himself. When she spoke of her latest advertising campaign, an initiative for a children's hospital, he leaned in, his smile warm. "That's you, Elena. Taking something corporate and making it mean something real." She flushed, not from the compliment, but from how deeply he seemed to remember her, how he had always seen the fire in her work. Naomi excused herself to fetch dessert, leaving them in the gentle quiet of clinking silverware. Marcus's voice lowered. "You don't have to explain anything to me about Adrian. I don't want to be one more person asking you for answers." Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders softening. "Thank you. That's all I need right now, space to breathe." Their eyes held, and in that silence, something old stirred, familiar, steady, but cautious. But peace didn't last. 3 nights later, Adrian appeared again, this time outside their office building as she left work. His suit was pressed, his cologne familiar, but his face carried the desperation of a man unraveling. "Elena, please," he called out, stepping into her path. "Don't walk away. Just hear me out." She stopped, weary but calm. "I've already heard enough." "I made a mistake," he pressed. "A stupid, selfish mistake. But it doesn't erase everything we've built." His eyes searched hers, frantic. "You and I, we had a life, plans. Don't throw it all away because I panicked." Elena's laugh was bitter, sharp. "Panicked? Adrian, you didn't panic. You planned. You lied to me about your brother. You told another woman I wasn't important. That wasn't fear. That was choice." He flinched but reached for her hand. "I love you." "You know I do." She pulled back, steady now. "Love doesn't erase betrayal." Adrian's mask cracked then, anger flashing where charm had failed. "And what? You're going to run back to Marcus? He shows up and suddenly I'm the villain? Don't fool yourself, Elena. He'll leave again, just like he did before." Her eyes narrowed, voice low but firm. The difference is Marcus never erased me, you did. And that's something I'll never forget. Adrian's mouth opened, but no words came. The fight drained from his body as he realized she meant it. There was no door left open. Elena turned and walked away, the sound of her heels echoing like punctuation. She didn't look back. That night, she sat with Naomi and Marcus again. Naomi poured tea, her eyes twinkling with quiet satisfaction, while Marcus offered Elena the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but safe. Elena glanced at him, her voice soft. I don't know what's next, but I know what I won't go back to. Marcus gave a slow nod, his eyes steady on hers. That's enough for now, and for the first time in a long time, Elena felt the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to step into. The weeks after Adrian's last outburst passed, like the slow turning of a page. Elena focused on herself, on her work, her friendships, her mother. Yet Marcus was there, a quiet constant, never pushing, never demanding. He understood what it meant to rebuild from ashes. Their reconnection began simply. Coffee at a quiet cafe on a rainy Saturday morning. A walk through the farmer's market, where Marcus carried her bags without asking. Sunday dinners at Naomi's, where laughter returned to the house like it had been waiting at the door. At first, Elena guarded herself. Her heart had been cracked by Adrian's dismissal, and though Marcus's presence warmed her, she moved carefully. She worried about mistaking nostalgia for love, but Marcus never rushed. He listened. He remembered details she thought she'd forgotten herself. The way she hated olives, the way she hummed when she worked, the way her hands stilled when she was deep in thought. One evening, he surprised her by showing up at her office after a long pitch meeting. Dinner, he said simply, holding up takeout from her favorite Thai spot. They ate at her desk, laughing over lukewarm noodles, the office dark around them. For Elena, it felt less like a date and more like being seen. By the third month, the walls she had built began to thin. They spent afternoons in the park, evenings at concerts, mornings at brunch tables with mutual friends. He was careful with her, but not fragile, teasing her when she got competitive at board games, holding her hand without asking when they crossed busy streets. Naomi, ever the quiet orchestrator, watched from the sidelines with a knowing smile. She never said, "I told you so," though it lingered in her eyes every time she saw Elena's smile return. By the 5th month, the spark of their past had grown into something steadier, richer. They talked openly about the years they'd lost, the choices, the distance, the people who had filled the spaces between them. Elena confessed her fear of repeating mistakes, of losing herself in someone else's shadow. Marcus admitted his own fear, that he'd waited too long, that she'd never let him in again. Timing was never our friend, he said one night, as they walked along the river. But maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Maybe we just start here. And Elena, after a long pause, had slipped her hand into his. Maybe we do. By the 6th month, their love wasn't a sudden fire, it was a steady flame, built from trust, laughter, and the understanding that they had both lived enough to know the difference between comfort and connection. Elena no longer looked back at Adrian's betrayal with bitterness. Instead, she saw it as the painful push that led her here. Back to Marcus, back to herself. One Sunday evening, as Naomi cleared dishes from the table, she caught them in the kitchen. Marcus drying plates while Elena tucked them into the cabinet. They weren't doing anything extraordinary, just moving together in rhythm, exchanging glances that spoke louder than words. Naomi leaned against the doorway, her heart full. Love had found its way back home. One evening, over dinner, he mentioned the upcoming cybersecurity summit his firm was hosting downtown. It's not glamorous, he warned with a crooked smile. A room full of tech minds talking firewalls and encryption. But I'd like you there. With me, Elena looked up from her plate, surprised. Marcus wasn't a man who paraded people into his professional world lightly. His career had always been steady, disciplined, focused, an anchor he rarely allowed others to disturb. The invitation felt less like a casual date and more like a gesture of trust. I'd love to, she said, her voice warm. The day of the summit arrived crisp and clear. Elena walked beside Marcus into the hotel ballroom, the air humming with low conversation and the faint scent of polished wood and coffee. Screens lined the walls with slides flashing phrases like data protection in the digital age and the human side of cybersecurity. Marcus's colleagues greeted him with respect, firm handshakes, nods and smiles that spoke of his reputation. Yet when they glanced at Elena, Marcus always introduced her with quiet pride. "This is Elena," he said, the words carrying weight. "She's with me, my +1. At first, Elena lingered on the edges, listening as acronyms and jargon flew around the room. But soon, she found her stride. Her background in advertising gave her a unique lens, and when one of Marcus's partners mentioned struggling to communicate their mission to the public, she offered thoughtful insight. "People don't connect with systems," she explained. "They connect with stories. Show them who you're protecting, not just what you're protecting." The group paused, impressed. Even Marcus looked at her with a spark of admiration, as though seeing her in a new light. Later, during his panel discussion, Elena watched from the front row. Marcus spoke with confidence, his deep voice grounding the room. He wasn't just brilliant. He was passionate, committed to using his expertise for good. Pride swelled in her chest. Afterward, as they slipped into a quieter corner, Marcus leaned down. "I think you just won them over more than I did." Elena laughed softly. "I just spoke their language in a different way." His expression softened, his eyes steady on hers. "That's what I love about you. You don't just stand beside me, you fit into my world, and somehow you make it better." Her heart tightened at the honesty in his words. She realized then that this wasn't just about being introduced to his colleagues. It was about Marcus showing her the parts of his life he had once kept separate, and choosing now to share them. For Elena, it was more than an introduction. It was a beginning. It began in whispers Marcus carried only to himself. 6 months of steady laughter, shared meals, and honest conversations had rebuilt something between him and Elena that felt unshakable. She no longer walked with the guarded weight of someone bracing for disappointment. With him, she was lighter, more herself. One Sunday afternoon, after Elena excused herself to take a work call, Marcus lingered in Naomi's kitchen, drying dishes beside her. The rhythm was comfortable, like family. Naomi didn't press him with questions, but she had a way of looking at him that made it impossible to hide. "You've been watching her bloom again," Naomi said finally, handing him another plate. "I see it in her smile. And in yours." Marcus paused, dish towel in hand. He could have deflected, but instead, he let out a slow breath. "I don't want to lose this. Not again. I want her to know I'm in it for life." Naomi's eyes softened, though her expression stayed measured. "That's no small promise, Marcus. I know." His voice steadied, firm now. "But I've carried it for years. Even when we were apart, she was the one I measured everything else against. Being back here, back with her, it feels like a second chance I don't want to waste." Naomi set the plate down and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You know, my daughter's been through enough to doubt her own worth." Adrian nearly crushed the light out of her. "If you mean this, you can't leave room for her to wonder." "Not once." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight with resolve. "I won't. She deserves certainty. She deserves joy, and I want to be the one to give it to her." For a long moment, Naomi just studied him, her gaze searching. Then slowly she smiled, small but full of meaning. "I always knew you were different, Marcus. Even when you were just that lanky boy, sitting on my porch with my daughter, too shy to hold her hand." He laughed under his breath, shaking his head at the memory. Naomi reached out, resting her hand over his. "If this is what you want, if this is where your heart is, I'll stand behind you. You have my blessing." Relief and gratitude flickered across Marcus's face. It wasn't the grand approval of a parent at a formal proposal, but it was the kind that mattered more, quiet, genuine, unshakable. As Elena's voice carried faintly from the other room, still on her call, Marcus tucked that blessing into his chest like a vow. Soon, he told himself. Not rushed, not forced, but soon he would find the right moment to tell Elena that his heart was already hers for good. Marcus planned quietly, without spectacle. He didn't want fireworks or grand gestures. He wanted something true, something that reflected them. After talking with Naomi, he chose the place where his life had always felt most grounded, the little church fellowship hall where he and Elena had first seen each other again, months earlier. On a crisp Saturday evening, Marcus invited Elena to join him there under the pretense of helping set up for a community dinner. She agreed easily, slipping her hand into his as they walked across the paved lot, the golden light of sunset spilling over the building. Inside, instead of bustling tables and chatter, the room was quiet. A handful of candles flickered along a single table draped in linen. In the center sat a simple bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind Elena had once arranged there. She paused, her breath catching. "Marcus, what is this?" He turned to her, his steady eyes soft but intent. "This place brought us back together, Elena. It reminded me that timing may separate people, but love has a way of finding its way home." Her chest tightened as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Dropping to one knee, he held it open. Inside, a ring elegant and timeless. "Elena," he said, voice low but certain, "I've loved you in silence. I've loved you in distance, and now I want to love you close and together for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes, her hand trembling as she covered her mouth. For a heartbeat, the room was still. Then she laughed through her tears, nodding. "Yes, Marcus." 1,000 times, yes, as he slid the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her. Naomi's quiet figure appeared in the doorway, smiling like a woman whose prayers had finally been answered. 3 months later, the church was filled with soft light, its stained glass windows scattering colors across the pews. The air carried the sweet fragrance of lilies and roses, arranged lovingly by Naomi and her friends. It wasn't a grand affair with hundreds of guests, but a gathering of those who mattered most, family, close friends, and neighbors who had watched Elena and Marcus grow up, drift apart, and find their way back. Elena stood at the back, her heart racing beneath the folds of her ivory gown. The dress wasn't lavish, but it was perfect. Simple satin that skimmed her frame, with lace details at the sleeves. Naomi fastened a small locket at her neck. Inside it, a faded photo of Elena and Marcus as teenagers. "You look like joy itself," Naomi whispered, her voice trembling. When the music began, Elena stepped forward. Every eye turned, but hers found only one, Marcus, waiting at the altar, his expression steady yet softened with awe. He wore a tailored navy suit, not flashy, but it carried him with quiet dignity. As she walked toward him, memories of their journey flooded her. Their youthful love, the years apart, the pain of betrayal, and the 6 months of rebuilding trust. Every step was a bridge from what had been to what was about to begin. The vows were spoken slowly, each word deliberate, each promise soaked in meaning. "I vow," Marcus said, voice thick with emotion, "to never let you doubt your worth, to stand by you in every season, and to love you with honesty and with joy." Tears shimmered in Elena's eyes as she replied, "And I vow to choose us, always to honor the love we lost, the love we found again, and the love we'll carry forward." When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the room erupted in applause. Their kiss wasn't dramatic, but it carried the weight of years and the freedom of forever. Years later, the house wasn't large, but it was filled with life. The walls held photographs of milestones, Marcus and Elena's wedding day, vacations by the sea, Naomi holding her first grandchild with tears in her eyes. Laughter often echoed down the hall. From bedtime stories to weekend breakfasts, where the kitchen smelled of pancakes and maple syrup. Years had passed since that night in Naomi's dining room when truth and betrayal had collided. Adrian was little more than a shadow in Elena's memory now, a lesson more than a wound. What remained and what mattered was what she had chosen after, the steady flame of Marcus's love. On Saturday mornings, Marcus still rose early, making coffee just the way Elena liked, strong, with a hint of vanilla. He'd bring it to her on the porch, where she sat watching the children play in the yard. Their daughter chased butterflies with a net too big for her hands, while their son kicked a ball across the grass, shouting for his father to join. Sometimes, Marcus would look at Elena the way he had on their wedding day, with awe, as though he still couldn't believe she was his. And Elena, in those quiet moments, would squeeze his hand and smile, knowing the years had only deepened what time had once threatened to take. Naomi, older now but no less sharp, often joined them on the porch. She would laugh at the children's antics, sip her tea, and remark, "I told you, love always finds its way home." And as twilight painted the sky with gold, Elena felt certain she was exactly where she was meant to be. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tales. Hope you enjoyed this love story. Help support our channel with like, share, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.